offices in 25 countries. Also involved in the discussion on stage, Mr. Munford from Akamai Technologies, Piotr Kabaj from Warner Music, Mattias Hjelmstedt from MagineTV, and Rogier Croes from MEC Global.
So I think we're all ready and present. So we've got about 30 odd minutes here to pose some questions to some of the experts on the panel. I'm going to moderate this session. And rather than go through introductions, I think we've heard of everybody's title, etc. I'm going to dive straight in, if that's okay. So I'm actually going to start off with some interesting questions here around regulation, and I'd like to start with Mattias actually, and ask how should regulation be handled in the online TV world? That's an interesting topic of discussion.
Right, thank you. It's a really hot potato because if you look at US and FCC, they've just regulated and talk a lot about how to handle net neutrality. And the next big thing they're talking about now is how to handle regulations for over-the-top television and everything being broadcasted that way. I've also been in front of the OECD and talked to regulators in the whole world about this issue. And the interesting thing with regulations is a two-sided sword, because the internet industry always says, give us freedom and regulate so we can do everything we want on the internet. But they don't want to have the demands that regulation put on them that the old world has. So when it comes to TV, for instance, cable operators are today regulated in a way where they get access to content and you cannot deny them content, for instance. So there is something called must carry, which is people have to give the content to cable operator, but they also have to carry it. So there is a two-side of it. And there are demands that goes to it, which is uptime, quality, emergency signals, and a lot of those things that has to do with the consumer responsibility. Also how you have to take care of the content. And a lot of the digital world has not adapted to that part of the regulation, but they still want access to all the content. So what is happening in the regulation world is that they're looking to do regulation that benefits internet but also puts the demand on it. That's one point. And the second point is regulation should not interfere too much in market dynamics because things happen by themselves. For instance, when it comes to distribution, and we've heard it quite a bit here when it comes to even in EU here, that content should flow free. You should be able to have your content everywhere. You should not be locked in geo-locations, etc. But you don't look at the downside of what's happening in that case scenario, because anyone that produces content locally and have local distribution or have a distribution partner that distributes it globally will have to be masters of distribution themselves to get it out into all the platforms. And what's happening as well is that you have companies like, I met the F-Secure here, that basically are harmonizing where you are in the world by creating a VPN connection you can just change. And Netflix, for instance, 30% of their customers in US are non-US. So what's happening is that the market is slowly forcing the industry there by itself, and then it's the consumer that decides, not the regulator, how it should be handled. So it's something that should be handled by care, because regulation can also disrupt and destroy.
Thank you very much indeed. That's it's going to become a hot potato in the not too distant future. I'm going to move on actually, and I'm going to turn my attention to some of the challenges for OTT, over-the-top content distributors. Didier, I'd like to perhaps get your view on this. So what do you think are the biggest challenges that content distributors, be that music or video, will face and need to overcome to be successful?
I mean, it is very clear to us that we need to give the consumer what they want, which is the consumer wants to consume the content they like when they want it and on a device that they have in their hands at that time. I'll give you an example. Last night, for those of you who are Bulgarians, there was a show on Nova called Vekapki Voda. It's Your Face Sounds Familiar, the show that Endemol produces in the UK. Between 1 and 1.5 million of you watched it directly on your TV set in your living room. Another 25,000 of you watched it on the NovaTV site because the channel is streamed directly there. Today, another 100,000 of you watched it on the catch-up service of Nova Play. And probably in the next 30 days, another 1 million of you will watch it again on VBox, which, as you know, is the Bulgarian YouTube. So, for us, you know, as content producer, digital is a lot more opportunity. It means there are a lot more people that can watch what I produce than ever before. You know, I think our friends from Warner made a very good comment, which was the music industry did not create Spotify or did not create iTunes. The TV industry learned from it. What are the OTT services that are offered? What is the BBC iPlayer? What is Nova Play? Those are basically Spotify / iTunes models. SVOD, TVOD, OTT are just, you know, the TV industry response to what I think the music industry missed for many years.
Thank you very much indeed. Just moving sort of quickly on now. So I'm going to turn my attention to tips from the panel. And Rogier, just thinking about the type of businesses we perhaps have in the audience here today, what are the kind of things that brands can do to be ready for the future that we've been discussing? What are the key kind of tips?
Well, I don't want to be very skeptical in this, but I do think that you see a lot of brands who would like to be like a company like Uber or Airbnb, but these companies have such a different starting point. So they have built their DNA so different from the ground up. I do think that, and I think that was also in the chat this morning, that a lot of the prediction about sort of which brands will still be around in 10 years from now, that yes, there will be a lot of very famous brands will go in the same direction as Kodak, Nokia, who really thought they had, you know, we are big, we have everything, we have control over this, and actually found themselves in a very bad place now. It's very difficult actually to say what you should be doing. I would think that you have to attract different people sometimes. Be brave and attract different people. Not hire the same like for like, but try to hire different kind of brand of people which actually might positively influence the DNA of your company and help to think different than what you have been doing in the past. And as I also said on my last slide, it's really true what you see happening, and it's really one of the most difficult things, also for myself. You have your own view about how people behave, because you're also looking how you behave. And I think that's what these new companies like as I said, Airbnb and Uber are doing very good. They are not trying to get in those shoes. They're really much listening to what people say about them and acting on that. So they're not. It's the difference between trying to rule from the boardroom or actually start listening to the audience and acting on what people actually ask for.
That's some great pointers. I'm actually going to extend that slightly, and I'm going to turn to Scott here and ask. So looking more around the sort of concept around business models. Do you see any sort of new business models on the horizon that have really yet to be implemented?
Yeah, certainly in the music business. We're only beginning to touch on some of the models. I think one of the problems is people think it's all or nothing, and like you mentioned earlier, some people want vinyl. They still like something physical. Other people want to download a track. Some people are willing to pay a monthly fee because that's a good value. You give me, you know, $10, 10 euros, 10 pounds, some amount per month, and you have access to everything. That's a good model. Other people get it for free, and they want, you know, they're willing to have it subsidized by a brand or advertising. But we're starting to see other models. You know, one I like a lot is the kind of pay-as-you-go model. So for a streaming service, why should I, if I don't listen to that much music, why should I have to pay for a large subscription service? But then again, I don't want my music consumption patterns interrupted by advertising. So now there's models where you can do micropayments for every listen. So imagine you're a pay-as-you-go mobile subscriber, or even just a regular mobile subscriber, and maybe it costs you 1 penny every time you stream a song. Well, if you listen 20 or 30 times, it's still cheaper than buying it, and you probably don't want to spend a tenner a month because you don't listen to that much. So you can listen to a few hours of music a week, and that actually satisfies you, and the price point of that fits for who you are as a customer. So I think we're going to start exploring those models also, because if you imagine, you know, people are consuming, you know, music on their mobile, they're used to paying for things that way. They pay for voice and data and text messages. They pay for what they use, not what they don't.
Thank you very much. I'm going to keep on the music industry, actually. And so, you know, Piotr, you gave us a great kind of insight into the music world of today. And I guess, you know, music is one of the first, you know, industries really to be affected by the digital transition. What lessons do you think that we could collectively learn from the experience that you had within the music industry? What were there any particular things that perhaps you would do differently?
You can wait and create something special. You have to be on time. We lost in 2000 the momentum, and now we have to deal with Spotify, with Deezer, Wimp, with many, you know, shops in the world, and we are losing also the money because we have the content. The content is the king, but the king has to deal with the shops, and this is with the, you know, movie business. The movie business, what I said with Netflix in Poland and in many countries in the world, they're waiting. Naturally, in a film business, you have cinemas, the theater in the States, 6 months after DVD. After DVD, you have maybe the VOD. In our case, the same day you have on iTunes, on Spotify, Deezer, in the shops, on the vinyl sometimes. We are changing now the release date for Friday because maybe around 70 to 80% from the research, the people are coming and buying CDs in the shops Friday, Saturday, in some countries like Poland, in Sunday also. And Monday, what we have the release date now, it's only 5 or 6%. That we want to have the release date of the album the same day, everywhere, on the midnight of Friday. That we are proposing to everybody, every music. It's 43 million tracks you have an access. There's not so many film in the VOD, but with the books business and newspapers business, it's different because some people that don't like it, you know, to read the books on the iPads or Kindle, and they prefer, you know, the paper. But it's only 5 to 7% you can access, and there is not a big catalog in the internet. We bought, like Warner Music Poland, we bought a communist company with 37, Polskie Nagrania, with 37,000 tracks. We have to go to the artist, sign a deal, negotiate, digitalize that on the proper way, and to put in the internet. From this, we know that's only 9,000 songs. It's an enormous work to do, to be on time and to propose to everybody the music.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn my attention to a topic which I guess is relevant to everybody on the stage, and that's analytics or big data, as it's often termed. And I'm going to pose a question to Mattias first, which is, thinking about the consumer market itself, and then thinking about the organizations that serve the consumer market, how can big data really help both the consumer and also the businesses which are engaging with them?
Yeah, big data is super interesting by what it can achieve. It's like a big buzzword, but a lot of people don't really know what to do with the data. So one thing is collecting data, and one thing is using data. And I'm actually going to use something I used in a previous keynote when we talked. So there's a very common expression that content is king, right? I just heard it here. But context is King Kong. Because if you don't have any context around the content, you're not going to continue being in one space. What's going to happen is, and that's a little bit of dangerous thing that is currently happening to the music industry. You got a Spotify and you got all the music there. And instead of the record labels having their own services, you had to turn to 5 or 6, and you have to remember what artists were. So you get the context of one player, you got everything in there to be able to listen to it. That's the first step, to be able to have access to the content in one place and not have to be on several. And with the rise of Tidal and probably upcoming Beats, you will have artists signing to one of the music services, and you're going to have several. But big data in terms of that is, once you have the data, and I talked about noise on television, is that currently there's so much content that you don't know what to watch, and you have too many choices, and it's really, really hard to really have an easy time at home. And data can really help you see what you want to see without having to think about it. And if you think about the future, the only thing that people are paying more for than anything else is things that save them time. Because the thing we have the least of is time, and data can really help save time. Because the less choices you have to make because of the behavior you currently use, the better for you as a consumer. An utopia in the TV world would be you turn on your television or your device, you sit down, and you only view exactly what you wanted to view that night. That's like the ultimate bench consumer, and you can use big data for that. That's exactly one of the points. You can also create better shows, because one of the things you know in a platform that measures everything in a data platform is that you know when people jump off a TV show the second, or you know the second they jump off a movie, and you can also see the reason why they moved to a different program. It was because of commercials. You can really see and achieve better content over time by seeing how people interact with it based on the data.
Thank you. And Rogier, do you have your views on this from an advertising perspective?
Yeah. I look at it in a couple of ways. I heard also today that one of the things which I think is also very annoying myself is that you actually get to a website, you buy running shoes, and for the next 3 months you're going to see this running shoes ad. It's really annoying. And it's really, for me, an example about sort of that you really think like, okay, why aren't they closing the loop and actually know that I bought these shoes and actually are going to offer me running clothing, for example, the next day. That would be great, right? And even more ideal would have, and because I'm fine that they have my data and then that I'm in there, even better would be if I put on my TV and then the ads are coming up, and what do you know? It's going to be a Nike running ad which is actually based on the fact that I just bought running shoes. You could really create a fantastic, seamless experience which would be extremely powerful for brands to connect with the right people. But I do think that there's also the situation that a lot of the brands are sitting on a lot of data and don't have a clue what to do with it. They have a lot of it, but who do you share it with? You know, if I share it with someone, what are they going to do with it? But you could actually build this whole line of experience which I'm just talking about, and I think we're still in that phase to think like, okay, who am I working with? You need to hire different people also within the company. You can hire a company to say, okay, can you handle my data? It's not working like that, right? You need to have really a strategy around this, and it's also not something which I've seen in some companies of, okay, IT, can you get access to this data? Can you do something with it? You know, it's really about understanding from the top of the organization what you actually would like to achieve, to have a much more direct, powerful communication with your consumer. And as I said, it's possible. I mean, we're not talking about video. It's not only about the TV screen on the wall anymore. And especially with having everything connected, you could really do crazy stuff, really impactful stuff.
Yeah. Thank you. Scott, do you have any views on this?
Yeah, I mean, if you think of it from a different angle, like the gaming industry, and the beauty of games are that they're designed around the player. And I don't mean just video games. Sure, it can be, you know, Candy Crush or Angry Birds or a first-person shooter game. It could be an old-style board game or cards. But the idea that when I play the game, it's all unfolding around me. And disruptive business models that have succeeded in the last few years have taken that and put it at their core. And what I see a lot of industries still use is big data to benefit them as the organization. But the companies that take the big data to make the experience for the user better are the ones that succeed. You know, Uber has lots of data, and they're gathering lots of information, but when I use it, it's only for me. It only matters that I have a good experience, and they're serving up all of that solely around me. And I think, you know, I come from the content industry, and we definitely don't think about user first. We think about how do we make as much money from our copyrights as possible. And then we design a business around that. But when you say, what's the best with the listener or the user or the player at the center, it gives you a lot of different answers. And using that, the analytics and the data for that purpose is what I think will create a successful business.
Thank you. And Didier, do you have any views to add to this?
I mean, somebody said, you know, from man to math man. I'm a mathematician by training, so I feel at ease in that field. I mean, in the television world, data was the old kind of data, which means you look at what Nielsen says, and you try to give a better product to your user. Today, with digital, it's a complete revolution for us, obviously. Yeah? We try to analyze what every user watches, and the big fight right now is in the recommendation engine, which is whether you look at NovaPlay, whether you look at VBox, whether you look at Netflix, what is the system going to suggest you watch next? That to me is how big data will transform television and digital consumption of content is through recommendation.
Thank you. And any views from the music industry? Because I think that's a clear area of where big data is being used quite extensively.
Data is important. Digital is the way of distribution, but the most important is the music. And the consumer, he knows exactly what he wants to listen, and we have to concentrate on recordings the very good songs, the best songs. And this is the content, and we are for the content. The rest is a big noise, and the rest is technology, which we are using for us. But the most important in our business is the music.
Thank you.
And can I just add to that, because I really agree, you know, with the content being the king versus the King Kong of the data, if you don't have great content, it doesn't matter. And the analytics and the big data is always after the fact. But are you the one that can identify something early, can write and shoot House of Cards before anyone's seen it? So big data is just after the fact. You're getting all the analytics, you know. Can you find Adele before she's ever recorded something? Because most people couldn't see that she was going to be the biggest artist of the year a couple of years ago. And so we can't rely solely on information and data and analytics. We also have to look at the content first, because without it, none of it matters.
Thank you. So I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to open up to the floor to see if there are any questions out there that perhaps a member of the audience would like to pose to the panel. Do we have any questions from the audience? I can't see it. Yes, we do, sir. I think there's a mic heading your way. Please be gentle.
Perfect, thank you. I have a question about the future of data, because I come from a research agency, and in the past research agencies used to handle the data. And right now and in the future, the data is handled by the marketing agencies themselves. And obviously they don't share the data with each other. So what is the consequence of that? First of all, the first one is that there's no common standard. So there is no like patterns or sharing the stuff. So if every agency keeps the data for themselves, they cannot share the mutual knowledge. What will be the consequence on the market itself?
Okay, good question. So who would like to take this one first? Roger, would you like to go first?
It's difficult to predict what that means, but I would say I agree with you. As I said before, I think that is a point in time where we are now. People start to realize what you could actually do with this data, or get a first clue about it, and then they get approached by different agencies who would like to do all kind of stuff with it. Then the question is, okay, how would you organize yourself as a company? What I see is that a lot of companies actually also have people internal now who at least develop a strategy what to do with the data. I think that's where it actually starts. You need to, I think it's, and that's what you also see with all these new big international players popping out of the ground, is that they understand the value of the data they're having, and that you should not just give that away, but that you should also have the knowledge internal and have a plan around this, and then work together with your agencies to team that up. But it's a big challenge, actually, how you, there's not a one-way street how to answer that.
My focus was that you all keep saying that some people don't know the data they have, right? So one agency knows exactly perfectly how to handle that, another, they don't have any clue. So, I mean, the development of the market is slower because the data is not interchanged with each other.
Mattias, you've got a view?
I do. I'll give you a disruptive idea, which I know people are working with. Is it the agency that should own the data, or is it the consumer that should own his own data? And I know people have been working on for a long time and are still working on systems that would let the user control his data. So he knows where he leaves the points in the world. He knows what he's watching and is monitoring that. And then the user could actually it should be the user's choice to give that data to someone or pull it back. And in that point in time, the users, again, would be the ones controlling the data, and everybody would actually benefit, because while they share the data with the ones they currently use. And that could really benefit both the user, and it could create really, really interesting new business models.
That's very idealistic.
Of course, yeah, it's idealistic, but I know there is a lot of people working on it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we look to wrap up this session? Can't quite see any hands being put in the air. So, okay, thank you very much for your time and listening to this panel session. I think all of the speakers will be around somewhere if you have any particular questions to ask or any points to make. But that said, I'd like you to put your hands together for our panel and their great answers to some really interesting questions. Thanks very much indeed.